Do go on to Slido, upvote the questions that you like. I'll try and moderate. I can't say I've got any experience with this, so if it's terrible, you can blame me. Let's just go on one at the top there. So from a contractor, we do some of this already. So how do we improve and use full AWP? Let's go to the contractor. Stuart.
Yeah. So certainly within our industry, within Fluor itself, we have it built into our sales, both from the first sales all the way through to our turnover, and it's embedded in every one of our procedures. So we don't try not to make our procedure too rigid, but we've got the AWP theme all the way through it. So actually we try and get our own staff not to think about AWP, just a standard practice, second nature.
Thanks, Joe. What upfront costs should I expect? Geoff and I were just chuckling about that one. To kick off the discussion a little bit, it depends on how much you want to spend. But I think if you're new to it, I think there's obviously a cost of maturity. But once you get over that, it really is a cost value question. So are you prepared to spend more upfront to make a saving during construction? And that saving should outstrip the investment that you've made. So I'm guessing, your planning effort may be increased over your traditional planning efforts. You may need some different people with some different skills, at least initially, but it must come to a point where you get mature enough that it becomes business as usual and you wouldn't expect any more additional from what you see right now. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the traditional way, and I'll flip it around, is it's the cost of not doing it. A bit like the very first thing, how much does it cost every time you have a crew sat around looking at a piece of work that they should be doing but can't? Or ripping out a piece of work that somebody else has done because they weren't busy at the time, without realising that actually the scaffold that they've taken down was actually being left there for somebody else. Or all these things happen, and they happen regularly, and everybody shakes their heads, and it's a hidden cost that nobody really fixes because it's difficult and hard to fix it. And I think the fact is that you can embed AWP not only as a process, but later on as technology allows you to, that allows you to start actually measuring those instances and measuring the differences. And that's what we heard in the first one, which is just how big those differences are.
One of our clients had asked us to answer this question. And so we created a definitive estimate of what it costs on $1 billion project. It was 14 million. So basically the answer is 1.4%. And of course the return is 10%. So that were the numbers we ended up with at the end of that. And that was everything. That was software, consultants, workforce planners, desks, everything. So it was about 1.4%. The one thing it didn't account for is, of course, one of the things we do in AWP is we ask engineering to change their sequence so that it is in tune with construction. So that, we could look at a sub-optimization of engineering and the same thing in procurement. That's really hard to estimate. However, some of the other things that it also didn't account for is huge reduction in indirects, or the conversation we were just having about chasing data. That all goes away as well. So there's other benefits that aren't included in the benefit analysis as well that sort of offset the sub-optimization of engineering and procurement.
Yeah, I would also, on the indirects, means that I think technology has moved forward that you probably can have less indirects, I agree, but you can also move your indirects away from the job site to off-site, and then you can get, if you're certainly working with a global provider, then you can start working at 24/7.
Yeah, and Rob, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but I know that we did exactly that on a project where we didn't need the material yard on site. We had it in another city up the road. Because we didn't need to go over there and get stuff. We just sent them a package a week early and they could truck it down to the site. So yes, great example of that. Or even on projects, get rid of that material and order it directly from the supplier in an organised fashion.
Yeah.
So,
It's the Dell system, I think. That's what happens when you order a Dell computer.
just in time construction.
Yes.
Could be a way away from that, but yeah, potentially, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the exam question, I know when I was asked to sit in this panel, it was kind of a question, how can we get the UK construction industry specifically to adopt, AWP principles, and which is an interesting one because I work in our company across different segments of the engineering construction industry, from large EP, we talked about Technic, one of my customers, but to shipbuilders, interesting enough, which are, in my mind, are EPCs that build vessels, to how to right through to the other end of the spectrum, people build houses, right, or buildings and houses. So every type of spectrum of construction you can talk about, and it's kind of interesting. This conversation is it's been all about EPCs really, not about traditional construction companies, and that's where there is a big difference in culture, and even the word E in that is a huge difference, because with Technically they're 20,000 engineers, right? If I speak to somebody like Barclay Holmes, they build houses, they've probably got, no engineers, right?
Yeah.
So they're not an engineering business that build simple assets called houses, right? It's a totally different kind of mindset. The principles of planning better and scheduling better and not having waste, and having people standing around having cups of coffee saying, where's the materials?
Yeah.
Is exactly the same. So I think we'd all, and of course there's the whole industrialised construction, modern methods construction, whatever you want to call it, and it is kind of gathering pace, right? But there's a huge cultural kind of challenge there to try and get things to change. So what's the biggest barrier? Probably culture, right?
Yeah.
And also margins. I think the traditional contractors building buildings and commercial are on 1-2% margins, and not building often $1 billion projects. They're building £50,000 projects, $100,000, So there's a scale issue in there. Could they afford the overhead, right?
Yeah.
And I'm all for this, but I know the customers I speak to, and large contractors in the UK, commercial contractors, they would never have ever heard of the word AWP or WBFP. They just would I've had a brain transplant, even talk to them about it. So it's a huge change, I think, in terms of mindset. But I think if you badge it under a different word and call it industrialised construction, or modern methods of construction, then they'll probably be in the same agenda. Right? So I think I don't know what the answer is, right? And I think one of the points made there, we talked about materials management and part numbers. I think the other thing that's very common in the UK in that commercial world is a very high degree of subcontracting, right? So people at Multiplex and Barclay Holmes, they don't do any of the work themselves. They subcontract 100% of the work. So they've got 50 to 100 subcontract packages, all with their own business systems, all with their own ways of working. They don't own the labour, they don't buy the materials, right? It's all been done by someone else. And there's usually virtually not a part number to be seen, right? The concept of having part numbers is almost completely alien. The concept of having material control is virtually unheard of, right? And how can you then do materials management and do material availability checking if you don't actually know where the stuff is and you haven't recorded a GIN to get it in? So all of that comes into this kind of conversation. So there's a huge kind of, and we work with a lot of manufacturing companies, and I take the example, Babcock built aircraft carriers, right? They do, I would say, everything we talked about here, but they don't call it WAFP, right? They just call it something else, but they execute work with a very structured, disciplined way with material and tagging and everything. And they can tell you every single thing that goes into that aircraft carrier down to the unique. But they don't. But that's because they're an engineering-centric organisation who think very differently and are much more structured in how they work. And they think about bills and materials and part numbers and structures, whereas construction companies don't. So I think I'm just going to throw you out some thoughts there, but I don't know what the answer to the challenge is, but it's kind of interesting.
And I think also, go back 20 odd years, people were trained better than they are now in tools. You started learning tools, you worked up to being a foreman. You look at it now, people are being rushed through training to be a foreman. So they got the technical knowledge, but they haven't got the practicality. So they've been put in an awkward position to try and learn this on the job, where they would have been trained as they were working through their career. So I think we're trying to rush our training and missing out the experience. Because most of this planning is experience. It's not, you can't teach it. You can work the systems, but but unless you know what you're doing, you can't plan it. So
AI will solve it.
if somebody's got the experience to put it in, yeah, that's super AI.
Sort of moving into the next question there, which is some of the common challenges. The themes for me there are the interfaces between parties, our tendency to work in silos. I think these are all things that challenge AWP, but essentially AWP is there to try and address some of those challenges. And then we perceive challenges with data and technology, but really they are the enablers of getting things done. Data's the grease, and the technology is a machine that keeps the processes working. So viewing them as the solution rather than the problem to solve, because then you're just fixing the tool rather than focusing on what the actual problem is can we improve construction productivity by setting up for construction earlier. Okay, let's move on then. Next question was, how key is the client championing the use of AWP in a project versus contractor proposing and leading AWP? Is there any data comparing each approach? Client perspective from Martin, maybe first.
Okay, so client perspective is, from a shell perspective, yes, we drive it, and it's in our contracts. We're getting better with our master contracts. So originally it was one paragraph. We would like you to do AWP. I mean, way back on, so Penguins with Fluor, there was probably one page that side. Now we have a very detailed section, and what we expect, the outcomes, etc., that we're driving for. On that side, most of our what I'd call tier one contractors kind of buy into that.
So I have a really good answer with that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So we have two projects, two owners, same contractor. The one owner was hands-off and the other owner was hands-on. The project where the owner was hands-off, they had litigation for probably 3 years afterwards. The same team, the same people from the contractor went to the second project where the owner was hands-on, and it was probably the best project that either the owner or the contractor had ever been involved in. The same people. So it is critical that the owner owns the project and manages it.
Can I just make a point on that? One of the things we talk about particularly is in the UK, we've got a lot of people talk about NEC contracts and how wonderful they are because they talk about collaboration, but actually that is the key to the successful delivery of pretty much any project is collaboration. Yeah. And if you don't have people at every level of the project team collaborating, you're not going to get the end results that you need as efficiently and as effectively as you want. Because if you don't collaborate, you end up with people not raising risks.
Yes.
I don't want to raise a risk because that might show me in a bad light. Yeah. And all of a sudden, they're not talking about the project success, they're talking about their bit of success, and it's corrosive. So yeah, if you can get an owner and a contractor, subcontractors, whatever, and your PMCs, what have you, all collaborating together, all working together, it makes such a huge difference.
Yes.
It's a bit interesting. I mean, of course, the UK, the BIM thing got endorsed by the UK government, didn't it? And that was a game changer. I remember speaking to one of our M&E contractors, and he said to me, this is 10, 15 years ago, he said, "Oh, can you help me get the BIM badge?" Right, that was his exact words, engineering director, because exactly that, he wasn't going to get any business unless he was compliant with BIM, right? Yeah. And it's the same kind of discussion here. I don't know where a lot of companies will wake up unless somebody mandates them, right? Because that was making them change. You know, if you said to a contractor, I'll pick anyone name, and said to them, well, you're not going to win this business unless you're AWP compliant, right? You know, whoever that person should, then they'll wake up, right? And then they'll start to react to that change. Otherwise, I don't think they will, right? And then the question is, who's the asset owner in a more traditional construction world? But it isn't quite the same, probably, as an oil company who've got tons of power and huge, right? You know, it's a government, maybe, you know. I mean, take a good example, schools, for example, those types of programs in the UK, though the government are kind of mandating or moving towards mandating MMC, right, modern methods of construction, or off-site manufacturing, or modular, whatever you want to put it, to the contractors who are delivering, right? So they're kind of moving in that direction, government in the UK, I guess, they're not calling it EWP, I don't, to my knowledge, right? So it kind of sits today in the world of oil and gas and EPCs, not in the world of UK construction language. And I think
that's one of the things that we're talking about here is the fact that we know you've got the data, you've got the experience. This stuff works, and then I'm sort of foreshadowing a slide later. This stuff works, and it is up to us as people who know that it does to evangelise it, whatever level of the project we're at, because we know it works, because we know we can save money,
I guess,
we can be more efficient, we can be more productive.
Yeah, I guess the question is, should we be promoting this under a AWP acronym, right? Because it's not got that much traction in the industry, right? Therefore, the question is, would you be better? Because it's the same processes we're talking about, isn't it?
So AWP is BIM on steroids.
Yeah.
That's
But
what
it's not. I can guarantee you that I could speak to any contractor I've ever spoken to who'd never heard of that term, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think the problem starts, because if you're going to sell something to something, you know, BIM, no one understood what BIM was, right? They probably still don't understand what BIM is, right?
Yeah. I like the idea of an AWP badge.
Yeah.
Fully on that thing.
I think you'd have some chevrons as well.
Actually calls it integrated project execution.
Because you know that everyone's using different buzzwords. They change every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Modular 1 week, industrialised construction, MNC the next, right? And there's so many different buzzwords. They're all kind of trying to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Right?
So our next question is, can it be used in infrastructure and building works? And I think that the answer to that question is yes. Can it be simply dropped in and used? No. So, you know, this is the whole point of us, you know, bring this topic up and try and get you guys involved, is we want to carry out that translation. We need to make it, we need to use the terminology of UK construction. We need to understand that it's not, you know, owner engineers, it's our owners or something else, or asset owners or something else. They're not as interested. They just want the building at the end. They don't care how it's done. We've got architects, we've got engineers and consultants. We've got design before tender and build. It's just not the way that we do things in industrial projects. So we need to be able to adapt it to that. But then we can recognise the things that we've got going for us. We've got, you know, movement around modern methods of construction, industrialised construction. We've got BIM in our favour, which we didn't have when we started this journey, 15 plus years ago in industrial projects. So there's a lot of good that's already there. Plus we've got the benefit of all the work that has been done in industrial projects. We can say that worked, that didn't work or won't work. You know, we can translate it. And right at the beginning of this, so you know, whether we call it AWP or something else, doesn't really matter. You know, it's about the methodology and how we make it work in this country. Okay, or for buildings infrastructure overall, because you know, speaking with Construction Industry Institute, so own the body of knowledge around this in the US. They realise also that they're very industrial project centric, and they want to know how it's going to translate to buildings and infrastructure in North America. So there's an opportunity here for us to be a leading light in that, and then, you know, offer that back to, you know, becomes global, because everyone looks with envy on BIM globally, you know, in the way that's been mandated. You know, whatever our thoughts on BIM is and the way it's been implemented is seen now as, look, they did that in the UK and it's a great standard and we're going to adopt it. Yeah, so we've got the opportunity to do something similar here. Right, next question was key performance indicators. What key performance indicators are used to measure the success of the EWP in a project?
Okay, I think I'll answer that one.
Yeah.
It's against the schedule. Are we releasing what we need to release at the right time? That's the simple key indicator. We're trying to get clients away from, we've released X amount of isometrics or die inches into, does it meet what we need to release when we need to release it?
Yeah.
So you plan the schedule, you don't have to go into amount of detail, get your CWP releases from engineering, the handover to construction. Did we release that on time and did it have any holds?
Geoff, maybe you could talk about leading indicators, the things that happen before we even get to the site, you get into that point of construction work package release.
Certainly from a leading indicator from our side is is the engineering data, so the documents, the data, the models, etc. Is it mature enough that construction can actually start? That's one of the key things. I mean, Geoff works with IPA, Independent Projects Association. That was one of their key things, a readiness for construction. Traditionally, maybe 10 years ago, we were all too keen to get onto the job site, to get it working, digging holes, pouring concrete, and then actually found that we weren't actually ready. Drawings were issued because the payment was indicated to the drawing issue, and yet it had holes on it. So a key indicator for us is generally about that engineering work package, which is completely aligned with a construction work package, just the way that we do offshore brownfield modifications. And is the information all mature? Can that team actually get on with it? And if it isn't, what can you release to the field which can be executed without the creation of rework? But definitely that's that space.
Yeah, and basically I would have said the same thing, you know, that complete packages is what we target. Just to the point about KPIs on site, you know, we have 2 KPIs that we measure every single project on. Did the foreman get a package, and did it close on time?
Yeah.
And if one of those is a no or not a very good yes, then you've got a problem somewhere upstream of that. Because that's ultimately the deliverable in every single system. And if you have a great system that doesn't deliver a package, it's not worth anything. That's payday. Payday is when you give the foreman a package that can get done. So that's our key performance indicator.
I guess productivity, you talked about productivity, is absolutely key in this, because that's the most critical thing that everyone talks about. How do we get the productivity up in the industry?
Give them what they need.
But that's about better planning and having less waste and having coordinated resources, isn't it? Right. So you're not sitting around waiting for material or equipment, and then you can't do anything. You always laugh when you see construction sites and you see you never see anything moving. Right, everyone's just having cups of coffee.
But we made it the foreman's problem. You know, we put them in the field and say, go find materials. Here's your guys. See if you can get a crane. Good luck.
It's interesting. I mean, we work a lot in the manufacturing sector, but this is how the manufacturing industry has been working for 50 years, right?
Yes.
You know, you'd never dream of having a work order launch in a manufacturing plant if you don't have the materials and you don't have the labour and you don't have the machine available, right? I mean, why would you ever want to do that, right? But it's easy in a factory because you've got control of all the resources and it's one place, and you can organise your organisation around those principles, right? And the minute you go construction, you've got 100 subcontractors involved in a unique site. That's the challenge, because they're all using different business systems, different coding structures, different ways of working. And then how do you coordinate all those different organisations in every unique project to work in a consistent, standardised way, which I think is why it's so difficult.
Yeah, you mentioned shipbuilding earlier. Shipbuilding is much more like manufacturing than it is like construction.
It's a fixed location because you've got a site, you've got a yard, right? So.
All right, we're going to run out of time. There's more questions we've got time for, but get through as many as we can. Right, what is the role of data and information management in AWP? What challenges are you facing there? Probably take the rest of the data.
I mean, I forget which major company, if it's Google or Meta, but someone said that data is the most valuable asset that we have nowadays.
It's a commodity.
Yeah, it's the most valuable commodity we have, right? Like if you look at a company like Instagram, right? Like they got sold for $1 billion. It's not because you can put a picture, it's because of the user base, right? It's that data that they can collect, that they can sell ads to. So then when you look at it from a construction perspective, one of the biggest things is being on the owner side of it and the value in owning that data. So there was a question earlier about, you know, how much more effective is it, I believe, if it's owner driven versus not. When the owners see the value in owning the data at the end of the day, they push those processes. And at the end of the day, vendors want to do right by clients. They want to be able to work with those clients. The big thing I think you mentioned too is cultural, right? They have a known way of doing things. Adding a process to that, you know, affects the amount of time it takes them to roll out the product. But when you have and Shell is a good example of this, when you have an owner who's like, take your time, we're going to do these added processes, this is the data that I want to see, they're willing to do it. And I think more and more they then see like, okay, this is a value add that I can have for other clients of mine. And then it becomes more of like a competitive thing and it gets more adopted amongst the industry. But the big thing is the data at the end of the day belongs to the owners, right? A lot of times you'll see amongst projects like owners sending in RFIs, or they'll use an EPC company who 3 years down the road after commissioning, they reach out to the EPC company like, hey, can I get the turnover package for this? And there's an additional cost to it. Or it's like they own that data. Or at the end of the day, the owners now are starting to see the value in it. And we're starting to see more data points captured, more data used, and all that kind of stuff.
I think if I can just add to that, the fact is, InEight are owned by one of the biggest construction companies in the US. And they took the decision in 2015 to become a data-driven organisation. And yeah, it's taken them years. But the fact is, and come and talk to me later, Kiewit have had, in a particular metric that they use, a 44% increase in their productivity by having the data available to make better decisions. Kiewit know which projects they are likely to lose money on and therefore do not bid on. They've got one of the best Standard & Poor's ratings you can have, certainly in this industry, simply because S&P look at them and go, they're people that don't make bad decisions in terms of which projects they're going to bid on. They know really early on which projects need additional love and attention because of their tripwire system that says some of these indicators are going the wrong way, and they put in the application management and additional resource as required, and it's made a huge difference to them. So yeah, the data is all, and especially as we come into the AI and machine learning piece, if you haven't got good data, actually all of the money that people are throwing at AI and ML at the moment, honestly, is wasted.
Totally agree.
But it's interesting that you say that it's taken a long time. Maybe we're always too impatient. Because if you think about it, we've come from a world, when I started, it was document centric, from the drawing board to the early days of CAD when I started. And it's like, okay, so we use CAD to produce documents. We just got better at producing documents from the drawing board. But that system had been going since the Industrial Revolution, and we've perfected it pretty well in the 40s and 50s. And now so it's almost a generation that will take us from a data world, from that transformation from the document world to the data. We're not going to do it. And we've been at it for 10 years and we're just getting there, second generation of it. It's going to take a while to truly get to that point.
And I think really specifically to advance what packaging construction institute, got working groups and research going on data standards for AWP. So it's recognised that, like I say, that's the grease in the machine. We need to get that right and lubricate the cogs, so we can lean on that as well. Okay, just another couple of questions. I think has implementation of AWP been recognised by the likes of APM? Don't know. I think that's one of the actions for our work group. We can push that. Yeah. So
who is that? APM?
Yes, Association of Project Managers, the UK's PMI.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So yeah, I think we all recognise that. Even though this is initiated construction-led initiative, it is a project execution methodology, and therefore we need to get project management, project engineering.
But as Geoff said, the more data the project manager has, the better decisions he makes.
Yeah.
So they should be on board.
Yeah. Last one for Martin. Can you expand on how AWP helps address project challenges, visibility, oversight, or too many central owner reps versus other processes? Asked by Chris.
Chris and B. Thank you. Visibility is a big thing. Obviously, even in the last 6 or 7 years, we have drastically reduced our owners' team. If I look at it now, 5 people on the job site kind of thing is not uncommon for a $1 billion platform. And that's because we can get visibility. We can keep actually our staff back in maybe the home office, if I'm talking about building in Norway and the home office in that particular case in Aberdeen. And we can actually see from the cameras, from the model shots, from the updates that in this case Accra have given us, we can see true visibility. The thing that we aspired to, which we're kind of getting to, is the surprises. So you kind of touched on that. It's like, okay, I'd rather know a trend of this material is late, this is going to hold up this piece, rather than the world that we'd come from, which was held back, and at what point are we going to tell the client that we are now 3 months delayed because we've gone wrong. And this kind of connected data world that we're starting to see with visualization, and I see the kind of next generation that we're working with people is that, okay, we all accept it's a dynamic space. Materials are late, maybe skill sets aren't available to you if you're in a remote location. But if you can plan for it and then adapt which work packages you can release to the field to keep everyone working, then we can we certainly become we ship on the date that we want to ship.
Can I give you an example? So this is one of our projects.
Small one.
This tells me how many documents they have issued today, and how many EWPs are satisfied, whether they're ahead of schedule or behind schedule, what material they got on site, how many guys they got on site. So this is the power of data. It's live on my phone.
The subtext to I think my closing slide is AWP helps and data helps you move from a report and react mentality. Oh my God, here's my monthly report of what happened last month and all the problems I've got to fix next month, to a predict and prioritize one, where you look at what you're going to do and you prioritize your effort accordingly to make sure it happens. That's not saying project problems aren't going to happen, but the fact is if you are in a mindset that actually says, okay, I know I've got a problem, but I know it now and I can fix it now while I've got guys on site, materials, etc., rather than me going, well, nothing I can do about it, and sending a report that might land on a project manager's desk a week or a month later, and him going, well, what am I supposed to do about it now?
Yeah.
Okay, we are eating into your lunch. Pun intended.
Yes.
How do I get involved? Fill out the form, please. Please do get involved. So you can get involved. And last words to Geoff.
Yeah.
We'll go back.
There you go. So the fact is, it is a proven technique. It embeds the idea of collaboration, so it actually supports some of the work that we have in the UK, especially around NEC, and the fact that we are actually collaborating to produce an outcome. And the fact is, like I said, good companies react well to problems. I mean, when I was first in, my work was in IT, worked for IBM in service delivery. The manager used to be a good service manager will react well to a problem and they'll fix it. A great one will predict that the problem's going to happen and stop it from happening. And that's the fact there. If you can react well to a problem, that's good. But if you can predict it and stop it happening, that's great. So, like I said, given all this, why wouldn't you want to get involved? Please sign up to the working group.
Thank you very much, everyone. Questions, keep it in the Slido. Stuart and I are going to hatch a webinar around this, and we'll try and address some of the questions we didn't get to. Okay, enjoy lunch and the rest of the conference. Thank you.